Hey AP-Langers, it's Dr. Clark, and this video is all about how to get a 6 out of 6 on the analysis essay for the AP Language and Composition test. On the analysis essay, what you're going to be asked to do is read a speech, letter, or essay by some famous person from history and analyze the rhetorical choices they make in order to achieve their purpose. Now, the prompts on the new exam have been streamlined with a stable prompt wording, so they should always be pretty much the same. It's going to say something like, write an essay that analyzes the rhetorical choices the writer makes to develop, achieve, or convey his or her argument, purpose, or message. The new 6-point rubric talks about the rhetorical situation, which is a reminder to us that we should always analyze rhetoric in context. In order to do that, I highly recommend that you focus on 4 essential elements of an analysis essay: the rhetorical choices and their effect on a specific audience in order to convey the author's argument, purpose, or message. So let's begin with the first step, identifying the author's rhetorical choices. So when you're trying to identify the author's rhetorical choices, there's really no right or wrong answer here. And there's a lot of different types of choices that you can focus on. You can focus on the author's diction or word choice. You can focus on syntax, which is their sentence structure. You can focus on tone, which is the author's attitude toward the subject matter. You can focus on imagery, figurative language, the use of facts, statistics, and examples, the use of symbolism, analogy, extended metaphor, even the use of things like satire and humor. For more information about the specific types of rhetorical choices that you can identify in analysis, check out our other video, which is all about identifying rhetorical choices for an analysis essay. Once you've identified 3 or 4 specific choices that the author's made, you want to think about why the author made those choices. How does it help them achieve their goal? How does it help them convey their argument? How does it help them achieve their purpose? If you just list choices with examples of them from the text without any explanation of how those choices work, you're doomed to a 2 or a 3 on this essay. So be sure to explain the intended effect of those choices on the audience. Thousands of years ago, Aristotle created 3 categories of rhetorical appeals which have stood the test of time and which are very useful in helping us to think and write about the specific effects of different choices on an audience. Those are ethos or ethos, pathos or pathos, and logos or logic and reasoning. This is a concept that's frequently misunderstood. These types of appeals are not simply rhetorical choices in and of themselves. They're modes of persuasion that are used to categorize the author's appeal to the audience, so don't get the 2 confused. The author uses specific choices or strategies in order to generate these types of appeals and create a certain effect on the audience. But when you're identifying the author's choices in your essay, keep in mind that ethos, pathos, and logos are very broad categories. Be sure to connect them to specific rhetorical choices, like the type of diction or tone the author is using in order to create that type of appeal. So rather than saying something simple like, the speaker uses pathos to persuade the audience, try to be more specific. Say, the speaker appeals to pathos through brutal war imagery to create fear of the enemy in his early 20th century American listeners. If you can consistently do that at that level of specificity, you should get a very good score on the analysis essay. One key aspect of the new 6-point rubric is that the student is required to explain how the author's specific rhetorical choices contribute to the development of the argument, purpose, or message. So once you've identified the specific strategies and their effect on the audience, it should be relatively easy to see the author's larger message or purpose. So let's look at the 3 different categories the rubric identifies in a bit more detail. First, the author's message. That's the simplest category. All it means is, what does the author want the audience to know or understand? The author's argument, on the other hand, will go a little bit further. It will usually center around some kind of a central thesis. Ask yourself, what's the author's argument? What belief or opinion are they trying to justify? What's the point the author is trying to convince the audience of? The third and most complicated or in-depth of the 3 is to consider the larger purpose behind the argument, and I highly recommend that you try to do this whenever you can. What larger goal does the author want to accomplish? What do they want the audience to actually do? It's one thing to analyze the message, what the author is saying. It's another thing to identify what the author is arguing. But a really in-depth analysis is going to put that argument into a specific context and answer the question, what is the author trying to accomplish? Why are they giving this speech? Why are they writing this letter? Why are they writing this essay? What is it that they're trying to change in the world? What larger goal are they trying to accomplish? That's the quickest route to that sophistication point that I can think of. For example, in Patrick Henry's famous speech to the Virginia Convention, his message was that the British king is oppressing the colonies and deserves to be overthrown. His argument is that the colonists should unite together and fight the British for their independence. But his larger purpose is to actually spark the Revolutionary War and begin the revolution, which in point of fact did start less than 1 month after his famous speech. So, mission accomplished. To write a really sophisticated analysis, be sure to consider the message, argument, and/or purpose of the passage, and build that into the entire structure of your analysis. Like all 3 of the free response questions on the new AP Language and Composition test, the analysis essay is scored on the 6-point analytic rubric. The first point is for the thesis. There are 4 points for evidence and commentary, and then there's an extra point that you can earn for sophistication. So let's start with that first point for the thesis. Now, honestly, this should be the easiest one to earn. All you have to do is make sure that your thesis statement responds directly to the prompt. Don't merely rephrase, repeat, describe, or summarize the text. Make a claim about what the author or speaker is doing and why. As long as you do that and you're specific, then... Wait, what? Be specific, identify. There's lots of different ways to write a thesis statement, but my advice is to be as specific as possible in the thesis statement. Rather than just making broad generalizations about the text, let's go ahead and begin the process of analysis right here with the thesis statement. Identify specific rhetorical strategies, identify their effect on a specific audience, and identify the author's purpose. That way you know you're going to earn that thesis statement point. Quick warning. Do not argue against the author or take a position on the author's argument. This is the analysis, not the argument essay. The argument essay is the third essay, and when you write that one, you can take a position on the author's argument. In this essay, you want to stay focused on analyzing throughout the entire essay. So there's 4 points available for evidence and commentary. And before we get too far along with that specific category, I just want to talk about grammar and mechanics real quick, because I know a lot of students get stressed out about grammar and mechanics. And look, you definitely want to avoid serious grammar and mechanics errors, okay? The rubric specifically says that writing that suffers from grammatical and/or mechanical errors that interfere with communication will lose at least 1 point. But that being said, these essays are scored as a rough draft, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Just keep mistakes to the lowest level you can. Be careful while you write and edit as you go if necessary. But I don't recommend that you go back and edit your paper after you're done. Keep in mind, you only get 40 minutes to write this essay, and if you're spending lots of time going back and fixing minor errors that weren't going to affect your score anyway, you're not really going to do yourself any favors. What I would say is write it as well as you can the first time, and then move on to the next essay as quickly as you can. Remember that you get more points for thoroughly developing an argument than you do for having perfect mechanics. So the more words you can get down in the 40 minutes that you're allowed, the better off you are. So my recommendation is not to waste time editing minor details. Instead, use as much time as possible in developing your analysis. Now let's talk for a second about your evidence. All evidence for an analysis essay comes directly from the text in the form of direct quotes or direct paraphrases. Make specific textual references throughout the essay to support your analysis in order to earn those points for evidence. Keep in mind that every point in your line of reasoning should have at least one specific piece of evidence. However, one mistake that I see all the time is that students confuse textual evidence with summary. Don't summarize at all in an analysis essay. You don't need to repeat what the author said. Evidence is specific references to the text or specific quotations that support your analysis of the author's strategies and their effect on the audience and how that helps the author achieve their purpose. If you're not doing that, you're summarizing, and that does not increase your score at all. One other tip that I always share with my students, try to limit your quotations to 6 to 8 words maximum. I don't want you spending a lot of time copying long passages from the text. Keep in mind that the AP reader has read the entire text hundreds of times. They're very familiar with it. What you want to do is focus in on the specific aspect of it that is the strategy, or the specific aspect of it that is helping the author achieve their purpose. And I want you to quote just that part, and I want you to build that quotation into your own sentence, rather than dropping long passages of the text into your analysis essay. In terms of commentary, here's what I want you to think about. In order to earn the points for commentary, you have to provide commentary that consistently and explicitly explains the relationship between the textual evidence you used and your specific thesis. Don't merely drop quotes into your essay and expect their connection to be self-evident to the AP reader. Stop and show the AP reader exactly how each quotation you used relates specifically and directly to your thesis. The best way to do that is to explain what the effect of each choice is and how that helps the author achieve his larger purpose. If you can consistently do that, then you'll earn those commentary points. So last is that all-important sophistication point. Now, I admit this is probably the hardest of the 6 points to earn, but it's a really important one because this is how you're going to separate your essay from all the rest. Now, I think the easiest way to earn this point is to explain the relevance of the author's choices within the specific rhetorical situation. If you've done a good job of identifying really specific rhetorical choices, and you can show how those choices help the author achieve a really specific purpose, then I think you can earn that sophistication point quite easily. One key to sophistication is don't shy away from the complexities or tensions within the text. Good analysis takes those complexities head on and makes sense of them within the specific context. Explore the ethical and political implications of the author's argument by showing why those words were so important and so effective in that particular time and that particular place to that particular audience. One mistake I see a lot of students making is that they don't want to get into the messy and or controversial aspects of the text. But if you do that, it's unlikely you'll be able to earn that sophistication point. Now, conclusions. Conclusions simply restate the thesis in new and different words. I don't want you to write a long, complicated conclusion to an analysis essay on the AP test. One sentence is sufficient. The analytic rubric clearly says that the thesis may appear anywhere within the essay, so try to write a better thesis than you did in the intro and use that as your conclusion. And then, even if you didn't earn that point the first time around, hopefully you'll earn it this time. So those are the basics of how to write an analysis essay on the AP Lang and Comp test. Be sure to check out our other videos about the synthesis and the argument essay. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Clark.